fabric buildings can make a drastic difference on your operation with benefits to your livestock and protection for your fertilizer and grain. And tonight, we're sitting down with the leading manufacturer of fabric buildings in the U.S., Accu-Steel.
Good evening and welcome to Rural America Live. I'm Tammy Arender. Good to be with you. A lot of people don't know that there's an alternative to regular covered structures on an ag operation. And so tonight we have the owner of Accu-Steel, Jason Owen, and the general manager, John Klain, with us tonight. And also tonight we will be giving away $100 gift cards and a bucket of swag to 3 lucky on-air callers, courtesy of Accu-Steel and their friends at QC Supply. So make sure you stay with us for when we open up our phone lines a little later in the show, because you could be a winner tonight. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us, and we want to get to know you a little better. Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Jason Owen, and I'm the owner of Accu-Steel. We started Accu-Steel back in 2001 on my family farm in rural Ottoman County, Iowa, and we do all our manufacturing there, and I also have a small row crop and cattle operation there.
John?
Yeah, John Klain. I grew up in Iowa as well. Jason and I have known each other for years and years, and we did some business together in the past, and always talked about working together. And a couple, 3 years ago, we made that official. I've got a little bit of a background in distribution and marketing, so Jason and I kind of thought that his background, my background would complement each other, and so here we are.
Here you are. And I love the story of Accu-Steel and how it was actually birthed on your farm and has grown since then. Tell us a little bit about the history.
Well, like I say, we started in 2001 and kind of out of necessity for looking for a product line that would serve rural farmers. We really built our product around the livestock, and we also did a lot of commercial salt work when we first got started, and that's kind of blossomed into a wide variety of applications today. So we've done fertilizer, grain storage, all the agricultural components, but we also get into the recreational buildings, basketball, tennis facilities. I think probably steal a bit of John's thunder, but we just got done covering up a pickleball court, which is kind of the latest fad. So we can do a large range of different applications with our products.
Right, a lot of diversity there of what can be protected, what can be stored. But going back into how agriculture can benefit from this, talk a little bit about why a fabric covered building is great at an ag operation.
Well, the fabric covered buildings do a couple things that traditional construction doesn't do. And I think one of our biggest benefits to start off with is the natural light. The buildings have just a wonderful natural lit environment. So if you're working inside the buildings, if you're storing equipment, warehousing, livestock, they just do really well with the natural light. The other components that we use with the buildings is the hot dip galvanizing. So we have a great corrosive environment. So if you're going to store any kind of fertilizer or manure or anything of those type of products, maybe some acidic type feeds in a feeding operation for cattle, they really work good, and they give a lot of longevity, a lot of value. That's another point for the size of the buildings that we can build, and the vertical sidewalls and the different type of building lines we have, and the advantage and the integrity and the infinity and now the crossover. We can just do a lot of different things for producers that a lot of people just don't know what the capabilities of the fabric buildings are, and so we can really solve a lot of problems at an economical price point.
John, anything you'd like to add about why a fabric covered building is a benefit?
Sure, and especially like you mentioned for ag or on-farm applications, I think Jason's being a little bit modest. Jason started Accu-Steel adjacent from the family farm, and our main manufacturing facility is still on that family farm. And a lot of our dealer and distributor partners are either farmers or are still very active in the ag community. So what I would say is one of the reasons that our buildings, other than just the tangible physical benefits of the buildings, are Accu-Steel specifically has some advantages for our ag and on-farm customers, because we understand farming so well, understand the needs of those farmers so well. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but while our buildings come in all shapes and sizes, we go out of our way to not shoehorn anybody into a particular product or product line. We really want to be consultative with those end users. And one of the first questions we would always ask is, well, how are we going to use it, and why did you call? And then we'll back into what might make sense for them.
Well, and I know it was birthed on your farm, and I see how it works in the Midwest, it works in the North, but my dad had cotton and soybeans in Louisiana. We faced some hurricanes.
Yep.
Are we talking about buildings that can withstand stuff like that?
We've built buildings in all 50 states and in Canada and Mexico, and actually we've got buildings in Europe and in Africa and in the Middle East. So we've got buildings really all around the world now, and they are all site specific. So a building may look similar, say in North Dakota, to a building at your farm in Louisiana, but they may look the same from the outside, but they're built differently on the inside, and they're site specific. So the wind loads you may have in a hurricane zone versus the snow loads that you may have up in North Dakota, we're going to site specific build those buildings. And then some of the things that I guess I've done over the years is being able to make smart truss designs and work with the engineers and our people in house that we can componentize that. So a lot of this stuff is in stock. So we don't wait for your order to come in. We actually are building stock all the time and keep a stocking level. So if you have a need that arises, a lot of times with our DOT customers per se, it'll get fall and they'll find out they have a higher salt need, or they'll have the ability to need something very quickly. We can a lot of times meet that for them.
And John, you also brought up a really good point when you talked. You actually act as a consultant, so I'm assuming that's kind of where the sales process starts. Is that you go on and you actually consult with that farm or rancher?
You bet. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that several years ago we chose to help our end customers through a network of 30 plus dealer and distributors throughout the country, is because it's important to us that we have local folks helping local folks. So we've got folks scattered all throughout the country from a dealer distributor standpoint. So whether you reach out to Accu-Steel directly to start with, or you reach out to one of our dealers to start with, we're going to start with those same questions. Why did you call? How are you using the building? And we'll back into that. And what I would add to that, I think, is we have a really strong relationship with all of our distributors. So they're an extension of the Accu-Steel family. So most of the time, we'll have a representative directly from Accu-Steel and a dealer partner working with a customer together to make sure they get the best outcome that they can.
Right. Well, and that knowledge is invaluable, like you say, when they can go to the farm and have that exchange of information. And of course, I know a lot of our farmers and ranchers too, they're thinking, well, I may not know exactly what I need. I'm not an engineer. I just know I need some protection or I need a storage space. So what are some key design considerations that, they need to keep in mind when they are looking for this building?
Well, I think some of those, they really start with the foundation, what you're going to start to put that building on and what your needs are. Obviously a livestock building is going to have a completely different foundation than, say, a warehousing building or a grain storage type facility. And that is one thing that we've built over the last, 22 years now, is that we've got the background for being able to come on a farm and say, hey, this is what we've seen work. Here's what our buildings can do. We can get you in contact with a past customer that maybe has done something similar to what you're getting ready to build. And so we can kind of build that little bit of network inside from our customers to our existing customer base to our new customers to have a good crossover, I guess you'd say, of knowledge and kind of what works and what doesn't work. And we work real hard to make sure our dealers also have that knowledge base, and when they run into something, they can get back a hold of myself or John, or we've got a team of people that have just had a lot of experience in this industry and really make a building that's going to do something specific for that customer.
Like, look, taking, for instance, this is something what would this be covering?
That is actually covering an event space down in Las Vegas, the one you're seeing on the screen right now. Yep.
See, I love the diversity of this. What you can do with these fabric covered buildings. If you need to have an event on your farm or ranch, because agritourism has become such a big draw now, so having something like this would be just amazing. You were talking about the fact that you're kind of building products, you've got the bits and parts and pieces, being processed all the time. Mm-hmm. But what is someone looking at time-wise, if, from start to finish to get one built?
It all depends on the size of the project. we'll have some customers that are maybe looking for some hay storage that we can get packaged up in a 50 by 80. We can get that packaged up and get that back out the door in a matter of a few weeks. We have other projects that could, we've got a couple of big projects right now that are going to probably take us, 10 weeks in production. So it just depends. I think the one thing to keep in mind is that the fabric buildings, typically we can get them built fairly quickly. We've got good access to inventory. But then the other point is they typically go up a little bit quicker than traditional construction. So there are some additional savings compared to, say, stick built or red iron type structures. There's some additional savings to those end customer can recognize some better other benefits outside of just the things we talked about with the natural light and the high depth galvanizing, and this quick construction is another one of those.
Right, another perk of doing that. John, talk a little bit about who's actually doing the installing.
Sure. So we're a wholesale manufacturer, so that's why we've chosen to partner with certified dealers and installers across the country. So based on the size and the scope of the project, like Jason mentioned before, a farmer might be able to install the building themselves. We've got the install prints and the install manuals that we have are pretty good. And then I think if you, with a little bit of time, patience, and a little bit of equipment, and maybe a callback or two to Accu-Steel, you could probably, I know we've dozens and dozens of farmers every year install those themselves. But for folks that don't have the desire to do that, we have a network across the country of certified dealers and installers that will offer turnkey solutions to the end customers.
And like you mentioned, you've got places now, even all over the world, but in all of the states, you've got people who know how to do this and are ready to go to work.
We can bring in crews from different, the dealers work well together, so we can bring in different crews from different parts of the country if necessary. We can bring 2 crews on big projects. So there's a lot of capacity that we've built into the system over the years.
Talk about the hot dip galvanizing versus epoxy. You knew I knew about that, right?
Yeah. The hot dip galvanizing is a really robust. It is probably the toughest coating out there, especially for the dollars. So when you look at if you're going to paint something or you're going to try to epoxy it, you have to be very careful with the prep on that. You have to be very careful with the shipping on that, and then very careful with the install, because one scratch on those type of coatings, epoxy or paint, can lead to a failure in the product, especially in a highly corrosive environment. So we cut our teeth on road salt. So the viewers that are in the states that get a lot of ice, that's a lot of the DOT stations around the country will have a product, either ours or something similar to ours, because they're a cost-effective way to store corrosive material. Hot dip galvanizing gives you a continuous coating on the inside and outside of the tube. It's put on liquid metal in a sense, and even if you scratch that, it still protects it. The zinc will still give itself up to protect the bare material. So it's a very high quality. We have very good partners that we work with the hot dip galvanizing, and it's just it's kind of that farmer tough mentality. There's other companies that use other products. Everything that we manufacture at our facility is hot dip galvanized. It's really the gold standard for corrosion protection.
Farmer tough. I'm going to get a T-shirt that says that. I love that, or at least a bumper sticker, right? Talk about, do you think that the fabric-covered buildings are better than the traditional metal buildings? What's the key benefit to having fabric?
And I would say it depends on the application, right? And sometimes we don't have anything against traditional metal buildings, traditional built buildings. A lot of times we'll find that one of our products, a fabric-covered building, might pair well with a traditional building. So for example, the example that Jason uses, I hear him use all the time, is for somebody wants a machine shop for their farm, right? And they think they want a giant traditional metal building with the whole thing insulated. Well, once we get to talk to them a little bit more, maybe they just want a smaller insulated building where they can pull one piece of equipment in at a time and work at it.
A couple projects in the wintertime,
couple projects in the wintertime, and then use one of our buildings where you can, for a cost-effective and from a speed of installation standpoint, they can get a larger footprint, a higher level of storage, and get all of their equipment in our building and pull one or two pieces of equipment at a time. So what I would say is, based on the application, sometimes our product is better, and sometimes there might be a better alternative. What our product offers is the most flexibility when you're trying to get something under roof.
And I would think the advantage, too, of having that incredible natural light, you got to be saving on electricity as well, because you're not going to have to keep those lights burning all day long just to see what you're doing.
Even in the wintertime in Iowa, and we get cold, we get below zero at times, not for, sometimes it can be for long stretches, but the idea is we'll have people working in fabric buildings pretty much year round. You kind of pick your days a little bit, but the idea is with that natural light, you're out of the wind, some of the same benefits you have for livestock, people will enjoy the same thing. I'm out of the wind and I've got a naturally lit environment. It's, like I say, we pick our days, but the idea is it's a different kind of environment compared to traditional construction. So it's just, if people haven't ever been in a fabric building, that's something that we've really encouraged, kind of independent on whose. If you're thinking about this kind of a building process, go out and see some. There's a tremendous opportunity that a lot of people don't even know about. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here, is to just get the word out that there is this alternative to traditional construction that may be more cost effective. A lot of times it is. As John's example in storage, a lot of times we can double, for the same number of dollars, we can double the square foot of storage for that customer. There's some things that we do differently. And then the versatility. We haven't really got into it yet, but we'll talk about grain storage. We have a lot of customers that are putting up grain storage with flat storage, with our type of buildings. The natural light, the grain keeps very well in it. They're easy to clean out. You can see in it. There's no poles. There's no posts. And let's say we don't have a bumper crop. We were fortunate enough here in Iowa right before we came down here to get a nice rain where I live in western Iowa. But if you don't fill that grain bin, you can still use it to park equipment. You can bring trucks in. You can do a lot. It gives you the versatility that you don't necessarily get with maybe a traditional grain bin type structure.
It can be shared space that you
Yep.
would not have otherwise. Yeah.
You bet. Sure.
Talk about the foundation that's needed to get one of these started.
Yeah, sure. What I'd say is we're a little bit impartial on the foundation. So based on the size of the building and the width of the building, the foundation changes a little bit. But again, if customers have an idea of what, I'll give you an example. I took a call last week, and the gentleman he had a fertilizer building he wanted to put up, and he's like, he had a concrete business too, and he had a bunch of 3x3x6 blocks that were laying around. He says, I have access to these. They're free to me. Well, based on the size of the building, that 3x3x6 blocks, concrete blocks, is something we could totally use for a foundation. So typical foundations for an Accu-Steel cattle building, typically those might be on steel beams, but other foundations might include precast panels. The blocks I just discussed.
What you're seeing on the TV now is a cast-in-place foundation for a salt facility.
Great. Yep. Cast in place or poured in place concrete. Really, we'll have some recommendations on the foundation, or for some projects, especially that are larger in scope, we might provide the building reactions for the engineering for the building, and then we'll work through the customer with the local concrete person to back into what that foundation might be.
A lot of it depends on your soils too. We've done projects up in North Dakota and South Dakota that's got kind of some tough soils. Up in the Red River Valley, where if you get down in Missouri, there's a lot of limestone. You get out further west, the depth of bedrocks becomes an issue. So that's where having those local dealers that know those areas to help plan ahead with their customers, so we can make sure we can offer an economical foundation option or solution that, we have a good feel for that. We don't necessarily engineer all those foundations, especially on the more complex projects, but we have some recommendations, and we can work with their engineer if necessary to come up with some cost-effective solutions.
You're going to do what works best.
Yep.
Did the fabric covered buildings, do they contribute in any way to, if a farmer's trying to be more sustainable, be better with the environment? We know all of our farmers and ranchers are trying to do that. Do these buildings help and contribute to that in any way? Sustainability and environmental quality?
Sure. The materials that we're using on the buildings, they have a cradle to cradle certification on the fabric, and then all the materials that we're using on the steel side of it is all can be recycled. Some of our steel comes out of a recycled plant out of Nebraska, in fact. So all the materials can be reused and recycled. So sustainability to me and that part of the business is just like being in the farming. We want to have, and that's the sustainable fabric there. We want to have that same mentality of being stewards of our land. We want to bring that same mentality to what we manufacture. So it isn't just about one certification or another. To me, it's more about doing things correctly, just like we would to take care of our land. We want to have that same aspect as in the building materials that we use.
Right,
So,
good points. Also, the clean air and climate protection. I mean, just such a great thing to have on your farm or ranch. I am just loving this. I'm learning so much tonight. I hope you are too. With that, though, we're going to take a break before we open our phone lines. That number is 877-731-6733. And don't forget, you could win a bucket filled with Accu-Steel swag and a $100 gift card, but you have to call in. We've got more Rural America Live with Accu-Steel next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Rural America Live with Accu-Steel. Our phone lines are open. That number 877-731-6733. Jason and John are here to take your calls about fabric-covered buildings. And, you know, tonight you could also be a lucky winner of a $100 gift card and a bucket filled with some Accu-Steel swag, courtesy of QC Supply. 3 lucky callers will be getting those items. Look at there. That's some cool stuff. I need a swag bag. That number is 877-731-6733. John, let's talk about ranchers who need help with their cattle operation. Why is it an advantage to put cattle under roof?
Sure. At Accu-Steel, we like to think that we're the best in the business of putting cattle on the roof. And part of that is some of the stuff we talked about earlier, that our manufacturing facility is still adjacent from an operating cattle farm. And so Jason and some of our folks still have a cattle operation that our manufacturing team and our office team get to see on a daily basis. So we think that provides us a little bit of advantage in that space. So whether it's a total barn or putting cattle on a roof, whether that's a bed pack or a deep pit, or whether it's shade or even portable shade for your cattle operation, we've taken inputs from the marketplace and the end user of the products and made some design decisions for our products to benefit those end users. So I think your basic question was, what are some benefits of putting cattle under roof? One is consistency. Consistency in not only controlling in the environment that the animals are in, but also consistency in your input costs, consistency in the labor that you have to use, consistency in, like I say, input costs like fuel that you have to use, anything that, any of the variables that you can take out of the operation, putting cattle under roof can help with. You know, we field calls from folks all the time that one of the reasons that they are decided to look into an Accu-Steel cattle barn is because they want to bring the next generation back to the farm, and having a barn and having a facility where they can maximize the space that they have available and control those input costs is what is going to allow them to bring the next generation back to the farm.
Right, that is a good point. We have our first caller tonight, Bill from Florida. Bill, what's your question?
I was wanting to know the longevity of this fabric. The Florida sun plays havoc with the tarps that I use.
Great question, longevity.
That is a very good question. Our materials, we have a 20-year prorated warranty on our fabric and on our steel. So the warranty is set up that if the cover doesn't perform over that 20-year time frame, it's just like shingles on a roof. So it's a prorated warranty. You do get more UV down in Florida than you would, say, in North Dakota, the examples we've been using. But our materials have had accelerated UV testing, And the materials that we use today, we are very confident in Florida that we can put a 20-year prorated warranty on that fabric.
Good information. Bill, thanks for that call. Very good question. Jason, like you said, this started right there on your operation, and you have cattle on your operations.
Yep.
You're obviously using this. So why is a fabric structure better than other structures?
Well, I think John kind of touched on it, but one thing I like to talk to producers about is risk mitigation. You know, we don't have a bad day in the buildings. Regardless of what the weather's doing, regardless of what's going on, there isn't a bad day being compared to being outside. So having that consistency, days on feed can change when you put cattle from being outside under roof in a finishing operation. Your calving ease of the cattle. We have a producer I know down in Missouri that I talk about bringing back that next generation. You know, they were calving in different little paddocks down along creek bottoms, and the son that was maybe getting ready to take over the operation it was exhausting.
Right.
And you put in rain or get an early spring or a mid-spring snowstorm, and the mud created in that situation. There's a lot of jobs out there, pretty much everywhere right now. So anything we can do to make that job a little easier for the cow, easier for the producer to be able to go out and calve, it's completely changed their operation, how they use their land utilization. There's just a lot of stories like that on, you know, feed efficiency. We not having a bad day in the building, you'll see that you can either feed less in a finishing operation and get that same performance, or you can feed more and you can get the cattle done. You can get the cattle to market a little bit quicker. So that's where we really have built a strong network of Accu-Steel cattle building customers. So once we see what kind of operation that you're interested in utilizing our facilities for, we probably have 3, 4, 5 different producers that we can get you in contact with to see, from a seed stock producer, from a guy that's raising some club calves down in Texas to try to get them in the shade. Get up in the Dakotas, you're going to be more weather protection. You know, they had a really rough winter up there this year. You know, it was a lot of blizzards, a lot of snow, record snows at times, and the buildings can really perform for those type of operations. And you can it doesn't give you those, it takes those bad days out of the operation. And then labor management's a big thing for me because I'm not always at home. I'm out with the business doing different things. So having a predictable labor, so the guys that help me with the cattle, they know about when they're going to be able to go home at night. Or if you're on an outdoor lot, or if you're out calving and, you know, the back 40 and the calves are dropping down by the creek and you got to go out and find them with the four-wheeler and all the different things that cattlemen do because it's the right thing to do, we can change that operation a little bit by adding in that building, and you can bring those calves up closer to the house and keep an eye on them. There's camera systems. There's a whole bunch of different technology you can bring to your herd that you typically would not be able to do unless you had them under a roof.
All right, for many, this could be a game changer. Let's go to Florida. And Christopher, what's your question?
I am a college student, and I've been in the ag industry for a few years. I actually was in FFA in my high school years, and I was just wondering if you'd have any kind of advice for what a young student like me could look for in a future in this industry.
Good question. I love it when young people want to become involved, and maybe they don't want to take over the farm or ranch, but an industry like this that can still be involved with ag.
You bet. When I took over our farm, we'd had livestock on our farm for since early 1909 is when my family bought the place. And in the 80s, we got out of the cattle business. It was more profitable and a better banking decision, a better financial decision to go strictly row crop and not have the livestock there. When I came back, one of my goals was, it took me a few years to get built up to be able to get back in the cattle industry, but the diversification that cattle give to an operation, when you can bring livestock back to a row crop operation, that gives you a diversity that you just can't get just in a row crop environment. And cattle are one of the last areas. So if you're interested in staying with the cattle side of the business, the cattle is one of the last industries that isn't truly vertically integrated. You know, we live in hog country. We've got a lot of chickens in Iowa. I think we're #1 egg producer in Iowa. There's still an opportunity for young producers to make an impact in the cattle industry. And right or wrong, for efficiencies, I'm not here to say right or wrong, but there's not a lot of opportunities in other protein environments right now. So When you can have that opportunity in the cattle, I think that's something that, from working on your genetics to being able to start to do some there's a lot of people that do freezer beef. You can make your mark still in cattle and still have an opportunity to make money. Where in a lot of those other protein sources, it's more difficult. So we think we can build a building for that can allow producers to be successful in that. And I think the cattle industry still has a lot of room for people to make an impact on it. So I'm excited to be a part of the little part we are. I'm excited to be a part of that.
I do love that. And Christopher, thank you so much for your call and your interest in staying in the ag sector. Now let's talk about return on investment. I know that's what a lot of our producers, they've got to look at that bottom line. I mean, we all do. So what is it worth it to them when they're trying to do something for their cattle to have one of these fabric buildings?
The return on investment is always one of those things that, once again, you just can't point. Everybody's operation is going to have a different reason for that.
It's not just simple math.
It's not. It is and it isn't.
Right.
We try not to do the math for the producers per se, but when you start to look at what pasture rents are in different parts of the country, if you want to put a pair of cattle out in, say, western Nebraska, run them on stocks in the eastern part of the state, there's different applications where our buildings make a lot of economic sense. And depending on the amount of acres it takes in New Mexico to run a pair, versus the ability to feed them under roof. It's a little bit different mindset, different equipment, but it really changes that land utilization aspect of it. And you come back to, let's say back to Iowa, where there's not a lot of land for sale, and the land that's for sale is very expensive right now. So if you do want to bring back that next generation, you have a much better chance to bring them back with livestock than you do to be able to pick up a quarter section or a half section of ground. So return on those type of investments compared to what you can do in the cattle, the cattle look pretty good right now. So we like that opportunity to be able to utilize the buildings in comparison to some other opportunities in agriculture. So I think there's a good return on investment with these type of structures, especially in the livestock industry.
And what I would add to that, what Jason was saying, I think I mentioned a little bit before, is we're having that sort of conversation with folks that might be interested in a cattle barn is, what variables can we help you remove, right? The more variables from your day-to-day operation and managing your day-to-day herd or your operation we can remove, the more detailed you're going to be with your projections on your profits, right? So
and that's where the simple math comes in. Because you can put that side by side.
Yeah, we can put it side by side, and we can remove some of the guesswork. A properly utilized Accu-Steel cattle barn can help remove some of the guesswork out of the financial modeling that all of our end customers have to do.
Right. All right, we're going to go to New York now. And Warren, what question do you have?
Well, I just have a comment. I work with one of their dealers up here in New York, and we put up these Accu-Steel covered buildings for towns for their salt. And sometimes it only takes 3 of us, and sometimes it takes a few more. Depends, like he said, how big the building is. And we've put up, man, I can't remember. I've worked with this gentleman for about 15 years, and I can't remember when we didn't have at least 2 a year that we put up. So I just wanted to tell him that I'm very pleased with Accu-Steel buildings, because we used to work for a different company, and these are far better buildings than what we put up before. So I just wanted to tell. I know the dealer's first name is Charlie, and he knows Jason. So
I do. Yep.
I see the smile, Jason. So I know you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the call and all the work that you guys do, and Charlie up there. So we really do appreciate that. So I appreciate the call very much. Thank you.
Yeah, Warren, thank you so much for calling in. I mean, we'd love to hear that. That's people on the ground. That's people seeing it. And like I say, he said he even worked somewhere else. And so he is speaking from experience.
So can I add something to that?
Sure.
So what I would say is when Jason gave me the autonomy to make some decisions here, at Accu-Steel, one of my little speeches I gave to our entire company was, I want to be a customer service based company that happens to be really great at manufacturing and servicing fabric covered buildings. I didn't want to be a manufacturer that every once in a while offered okay customer service. So I think Warren's comment provides me a little bit of confidence that we're doing things the right way. And what that goes to is both our end customers, but also our dealers. We really want to be close to them and provide them a higher level of service and a better experience from the first time they ever thinking about maybe they need a fabric covered building through installation and past installation. Because not only do we think that's better from a sales standpoint, but we think it's the right thing to do, and we think it's a differentiator in the marketplace.
Yeah, and it speaks to the core value of who you are as a company.
Yeah.
Let's go to South Carolina now, and Steve. Steve, what question do you have for Jason or John?
Well, hello. I have a question on the minimum size of the width of the buildings, because you show pictures of pretty big buildings. The minimum size width can you have, and the minimum size length can have?
Our smallest building is a 30-foot wide Advantage. That's a standard size that we sell. We can, on certain applications, build smaller, but 30 would be the narrowest building that we stock. And then you'd probably want to build that building, depending on your location, probably something be 30 wide by maybe 20 foot long, probably 10 foot on centers. We want to have at least 3 trusses in that application. So there's, that'd be about the smallest that we would stock. So a 30 wide by 20 long.
All right, that was Steve. Thank you so much. Because I guess a lot of people who may not have a big operation, they've got to be worried about where is it going to fit.
Well, I think Steve's. Sorry for interrupting. I think Steve's question is an important one, because as a sales or distribution and marketing guy, but by trade, we always want to talk about the big fancy buildings, right? But our bread and butter and who we are is and what started the business is always going to be a core portion of the business is smaller to medium sized buildings that provide farmers versatility. So 30 wide, we have some custom buildings that are a little bit even skinnier than that, if that's the right word. But sometimes when we're using our marketing material and we've got beautiful pictures on the website and whatnot, we like to look at the 300-foot wide sports arena. Right. But a much more buildings that we sell a lot more of are 30, 40, 50 feet wide.
And they're very important buildings for us.
Yes.
50 by 80s, we ship out literally hundreds of 50 by 80s, 50 by 96s for hay storage. Those are buildings that a lot of producers put up themselves. They're very cost effective. They go up quick. They've got a wide range of economical foundations that can go with that building. So, that is a lot. I think John's made a good point that we do like to show some big buildings, but we have a tremendous the picture when they show it of where I live at my farm where the manufacturing is. You can see down the lower stacking pad, there's a pile of 30-foot rafters down there because we want to be able to supply that building just like we do the bigger ones.
Right. All right, before we go to break, I think we have time for one more call. Joel from Virginia. And Joel, you are a winner. You got one of our swag bags. Do you have a question for John or Jason?
Yes, I do. I was wondering, I have a lot of woods around. I was thinking about maybe an automotive hobby garage. And how does that material handle or stand up to like trees around it, where the possibility of sticks and branches falling on it?
That's something where you really want to evaluate your building site. The building site itself should have trees and branches shouldn't necessarily rub on the buildings. I mean, if they have intermediate contact, but you should really try to design that site to avoid those type of, just like you would on a steel building. So it's no different than a steel-sided building or a asphalt shingled roof. You want to make sure you don't have anything rubbing or blowing onto that roof section, because over time that can cause damage to really any type of construction.
All right, Joel, thank you for that question, and congratulations to you. You got quite a swag bag coming to you from Accu-Steel and QC Supply. Again, those phone lines are open. You are welcome to call in with your questions. We would love to have you a part of the show. 877-731-6733. And we still got a couple more buckets to give away with our Accu-Steel swag and that $100 gift card. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. If you are just joining us here on Rural America Live, we are talking about Accu-Steel fabric-covered buildings, and we're learning so much tonight. We're also giving away some goodies. Look at that. It's a swag bag and a $100 gift card. It's a bucket filled with Accu-Steel swag. Just pick up the phone and give us a call at 877-731-6733. All right, John, let's talk about, we don't want to move too far away from these cattle buildings because there's a lot of ground to cover here and some advantages. Talk about, I know there's some government programs that people can become involved in, but they need to meet certain specifications. Will these buildings do that?
Sure. We can. One of the programs I'm sure you're referencing is the EQIP program, EQIP through NRCS, and we have hundreds of cattle barns that have or the end customer has leveraged those programs to their benefit. And what I would say is through either folks at Accu-Steel or some of our dealer partners, we can definitely help those end producers navigate the engineering and kind of what steps they have to take in order to qualify for those programs. Obviously, they're going to have to do a little bit of research, a little bit of work themselves, but we are super comfortable, and we've got expert partners kind of across the country that can help the end users make decisions that best benefit them.
Right, as long as they know going in that it does meet those specifications.
And one point to make with that is that all of our buildings meet those requirements, regardless if you use the EQIP program or not.
Sure.
So that's one thing that, some companies will build an EQIP building or a non-EQIP building. Well, you really don't need that. The government really doesn't, when you have things like Euroshows that come through Iowa, the big heavy windstorms, that's where that engineering paid off, regardless if that customer had an EQIP funded project or not. So.
Good point to make. Let's go to Iowa. Maybe you know this person. Steve, we've got you on the line now. What question do you have? You with us? Did we lose you? All right, well, maybe Steve will call back in.
Yeah.
Okay, there you are.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, I was calling to see, how do your buildings hold up to weather events?
Sure, I can answer that, Steve. Like Jason mentioned a little bit, all of our buildings are going to be engineered from a wind load and a snow load standpoint to meet the requirements for whatever zip code you're at. So Jason mentioned derechos. We have all kinds of severe weather in Iowa, and where all our buildings are across the country. So what I would say is, our buildings, an Accu-Steel building, is going to hold up every bit as well as any other fully engineered building in a weather event. Now, am I here to say that our buildings are tornado proof? I'm not saying that, but in a situation like that, we can. There's that's more of an insurance claim type deal. Yeah.
Right. They're not designed. If you have an insurance event, you have an insurance event. But if we have the same design standards that you'd have for any other type of building. So if you're talking about a stick build or a red iron building, we're going to have the same engineering designs and the same requirements for a fabric building that you'd have for any other type of fully engineered construction. I mean, you can kind of get down into the minutia of that, but it's for partially enclosed buildings, we have the same code requirements, the same design requirements you have with any other kind of construction.
So we'll stand up to Mother Nature. That is good to know. Let's go now to Vermont and Rich. Rich, you are a winner. Congratulations to you, first of all. You did get one of our swag buckets. Do you have a question for Jason or John?
Yes, I do. Yeah, hi. I live in Vermont, and I was wondering, could these buildings be built to look like a traditional barn, or like a car storage facility with the, doors on the gable end?
Yeah. We have a wide variety of fabric colors. I'd probably reference you to go to the Accu-Steel.com website for, we have a variety of colors in our polyethylene line, and then a lot of different foundation treatments. We've had some buildings be used for car shows, car photographs. We've got some buildings that have glass end walls in them, glass overhead doors. I think there was a picture earlier of one of our buildings at the Iowa State Fair used for the Iowa Craft Beer Tent. So there's a lot of different ways to finish the building and still have that very large volumetric space, the natural light, and then add your own little touch at the end of that project to really, make it your own.
Didn't know you could personalize it. See, I told you we're learning so much tonight about what we can do with these buildings. Let's travel to Arkansas now and talk to Jimmy. Jimmy, what question do you have?
Yes, I was wondering, have they ever used their product on poultry farms?
We have, but mostly for litter storage. We've had some designs where we've tried to, or we've worked with some from larger producers to actually use them as grow houses. And we do have a blackout fabric, which would be important for the poultry industry. But most of our applications in the poultry industry have come from litter storage.
And we want to talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit, especially when it comes to some of the manure and things that come from the cattle industry. But before that, let's go to Michigan and talk to James. James, we want you to get your question in, and you are a winner, so we need to say congratulations to you as well. What's your question?
You're talking to me?
I am. James, you have a question for us?
In Michigan, yes. I want to know what the snow load is on these buildings. I live in Luzerne, and it's not uncommon to get a couple foot of snow.
Sure, I can answer that for you, James. Like I mentioned in some previous comments, your building is going to be engineered to meet the wind load and the snow load wherever the building's going. So the example I always give, if anybody ever calls in and asks me this, off air, is a building in North Dakota might look the exact same as a building in North Carolina, but based on the regional requirements from a wind load, snow load, and engineering standpoint, it's going to be built a little bit differently. So we've got all kinds of buildings in Michigan, and we've got all kinds of buildings in Florida, right? And like I said, they might look the same, but they're engineered to meet the wind load, snow load, and building engineering requirements where the building's being used.
The rafters may be made out of thicker material. We may have the rafters spacing closer together. When I started this business, we really cut our teeth on DOT sheds. We've got DOT sheds at elevation up in the Rocky Mountains. We've got some out at near Yellowstone National Park that take unbelievable amounts of snow. I mean, it's crazy, some of the design loads, and those rafter centers were pretty close, and we had to build some buildings out of thicker materials. So, but we actually, we take that into account when if you came in to us for a price on a building, we would take into account the loading at your location and make sure that your quote accurately represented what you would need at your location in Michigan.
And you said you have a lot of buildings, too, up in the north already, Minnesota, Michigan, Wyoming, where they got an unusual amount of snow this year, and everything survived. Wow. That says a lot. Let's talk about, I want to go back, especially for our dairy producers, cattle producers. I mean, there's always an issue of hygiene and sanitation for the cattle, but for the producer as well. How do you handle that when you're keeping cattle under roof?
Well, the sanitation, we build two basic kind of barns in the cattle industry. We either have a deep pack barn, which is typically with corn stalks or wheat stubble, some kind of a moisture absorbing source, and then we'll put that in the barn, and then we'll clean it out once it gets carries enough moisture and enough manure with it. We'll clean it out and stockpile that for put it on the fields for organic type fertilizer back for the fields. And then the other type of buildings we have are the deep pitted barns, where the cattle will, manure will fall through the slats and go into a pit, and then that pit is agitated or stirred, and then we'll pull that back out in tankers or umbilical cords and put that back onto the fields. we've been doing this long enough that we've seen building technology really change and manure handling equipment really change to really cater to that livestock producer that's doing beef cattle, finishing on slats. And so we're seeing that technology kind of catching up with the type of manure. It's hard to handle at times. It's a thick slurry, but we've got the technology starting to come together where that's really becoming a very economical option to handle your manure in that deep pitted barn. And we're seeing more producers go that way based on the labor requirements of the ability of labor. A lot of producers are choosing to go to the deep pitted type facilities.
Right, seems like that works best. Talk about for the dairy cows. Can dairy operations use this?
Sure. Yep. So from dairy has robotics and that sort of thing included in that, and we engineer our buildings specifically for those needs. So we're working with a couple of dairy producers right now. We've got several dairy barns across the country, especially in the upper Midwest. But we're working with a few folks actually in Texas right now, and we're in the design stages of what might make sense for them, how wide the building needs to be, what sort of engineering needs to be involved to make sure that they can incorporate the dairy technology into that facility.
So as we mentioned earlier about dealers, we have dealers that are familiar with flush floor designs. We've the ventilation systems, if it's tunnel ventilation or cross vent, and then we've got buildings that are set up for like the automation, so we can actually take a medium-sized producer, small to medium-sized producer, and get the efficiencies that they may see at a larger milking dairy that they wouldn't necessarily be able to get without that robotic technology. So we have put in hot rooms for the robots, and we can do a lot of creative things with the fabric building. So and that's where it's more than just a shell. We don't just have a shell where we just, here's your shell and you guys can figure it out. That's where we can work with them to put drops in the building. There's different things we can do with the building technology to really accommodate that dairy situation. So they really work good for the dairy industry.
That's awesome to hear. And of course, it goes back to what you were saying. You still have to do your homework. You got to know what you want to use it for.
Right.
Yep.
And so you got to be able to communicate that. We got just a couple of minutes left in the show. I'd love to get some final thoughts, especially for folks who maybe are just getting in and tuning in. Tell us about the benefits of the fabric covered buildings by Accu-Steel.
I don't know if either one of us can really answer that. I think the benefits of a fabric building are an Accu-Steel fabric building is really what you get. It's beyond the building. It's really the people that are behind it. And I think that's from the people that manufacture in the office to the engineers, our partners out in the field, our dealers. I think it's a network of people that really have our customers' backs. And that's important to me as the owner to make sure that, the building is the conduit, but we really want to make sure we do an excellent job with the support of the customers and make sure we get the right building for them and they have the best opportunity for success.
What would you say would be the biggest benefit?
I would echo that. It's what sets Accu-Steel apart is the people and the way we approach our business, but the flexibility and the diversification of the buildings, and we have expertise in virtually any application that building can be used for. So if it's for cattle, like we spent a little bit of time on this evening, we'll have somebody that is an expert about cattle and putting cattle on the roof. If it's a pickleball court, that might be a different person, but we have that person too that can help the end customer make the best decisions that they can for their operation.
And I think what I've heard tonight, not only about the diversification, but you guys can actually fight Mother Nature. You are able to protect and store things on an ag operation. And like you say, unless it's an insurance event, you are going to be protected. So don't forget to go to accusteel.com/RFD to get more information and reach out to them and find out what they can do for you on your operation. I'm Tammy Arender. Have a good night.